Are these wheels any good? What about these set of reserves? Hologram wheels, any good? Passetti Picos, what do we think about these? How about Jake's Reynolds? These look good, are they? Set of Fulcrums, what do we know about these? There is so much choice in wheels right now. This could be your ultimate guide to finding the right wheel for you from scratch, piece by piece. Let's go. There are so many wheel brands around it now. It feels like one comes along almost every week and one disappears just as quickly. So how do you navigate through this murky waters? Well, I thought the best way is to literally break it down part by part, because a wheel is like the ultimate business model. You buy in various parts, you add your skill in assembling the wheel, and then you sell it for a higher price. But how we're buying all these parts has become very, very normal, and everything's become a game of branding and marketing and warranty. So this video is going to be time-stamped. Take a look down below, and we're going to talk through hubs, spokes, nipples, rims, then the entire build quality, and then we're going to dive into the warranty as well. So you really know, and you can really analyze for yourself what you're getting for your money. I hope this helps. So we're going to start with hubs. This is literally the heart of your wheel set. It's the bit that we all overlook. We concentrate on those aerodynamic rims, but the hubs really are the heart of your wheel set. And I've gathered here a selection of stuff that we're sort of familiar with seeing here. We've got our classic DT Swiss 350 hub. Now, the choice of most wheel builders and sort of the benchmark, if you like. This is where we start from, and if we want to upgrade or downgrade or compromise, we sort of start from here as our base point. The reason why nearly every sort of bike shop and mechanic loves these is because parts and stuff are so accessible. We can literally buy little parts for all the little intricate bits and pieces in there. So we can buy end cap solutions. So if you come in and say, I brought a new bike, I now need it to fit a 148 axle width, we can do that. If you've come in and you say, actually, I really want to run a SRAM cassette, we can change this free hub body out and change it for one that's can be compatible with SRAM cassettes. You know, if you wear these little components out, we can just buy them very easily and cheaply and get them replaced for you. So the way I see it is a DT Swiss is our benchmark. From there, we either go, well, do you know what? I really want something that's going to be even more durable. You might go to a Chris King. If you want to say, I want to go something lighter, then you potentially a Hope or a Tune or something more exotic from the German manufacturers. And if you want something cheaper, and that's where things like the Bitex, Novatec, all those stuff that you'll find on eBay, Shimano hubs, etc. come in. So from here, this DT Swiss benchmark, we decide where our compromises are going to be. So this is fairly typical of the problems that we see from own branded hubs or no names. This is actually one from Passetti. They actually rebrand Bitex hubs, but when you buy a wheel set, you might find, you know, their own brand on there. You might be a rebranded Novatec or a rebranded Bitex, or it could be something else entirely. It's very easy just to laser etch a logo on something pre-existing. Very few of these wheel brands actually make their own hubs. When it comes into us completely unbranded, it's very hard for us to try and establish where we go for spare parts. Whereas when you come in with a branded hub, it's dead easy. We get on Google, we buy the spare parts, and we crack on and repair your wheel. This is something very, very typical. This is quite a worn out hub. Comes with the old sort of quick release axles, which we can change. And in here, this is a sort of customer that probably rides their bike, and when it has a problem, they bring it into us. And when it starts developing a creak or a crack or whatever, they'll bring it to a bike shop. By that time, it's normally too late. So if you are the sort of rider that just rides their bike until something goes wrong and then brings it to a bike shop, my advice, really stick with something branded. If you are a meticulous home mechanic and you like taking things apart and keeping on top of your maintenance, then maybe you can take a risk on some of the less branded stuff. So this is fairly typical of what we see. So if the bearing goes too long between service intervals, you'll start to see that it sort of seizes up and eats it into the axle. This particular one even ate into this little spacer ring here. And this is becoming a real problem. This spacer ring is essential for separating the bearing on the free hub and the bearing in here and keeping those separate. So this is why this hub's in bits on the desk here rather than being used in a wheel. Other common things is these little pulls here that engage with the ratchet here. These can become quite worn out, or they get really stuck down. So what can often happen is that they all get stuck down and then everything just spins and rotates. That's normally because the little spring holding them together is rusted or corroded, you know. And then we have the whole mission of where do we find little components like pulls and pull springs to actually make your hub work again. Sometimes we could be dismantling a wheel and rebuilding it onto an entirely new hub just because we can't find spare parts like this, you know, and that's fairly common with some of the sort of the cheaper Chinese wheel sets that don't have any brands, and we reach out to them and say, hey, look, can you send us this? And they'll be like, oh, that's a wheel set we did like 2 years ago. No parts exist for that anymore. Other things worth noting, Shimano hubs, they've just moved to this sort of cartridge bearing style, but normally their hubs have like loose bearings, and for the home mechanic these are normally much easier to work with. And I don't know why wheel brands aren't using Shimano hubs, or even Campagnolo hubs for that matter, much anymore, because they are fantastic. They're really good value, and they're so easy to service. As a home mechanic, you literally just need two cone spanners, which are very cheap tools, and you can service them easily enough. And you can just see in there we've got this little line of bearings, and you can just pop them out, replace them if you need to, or add more grease, give everything a good clean. They are so easy to service, it's unreal. You just need a little bit of time and follow a video that you'll find on YouTube, and I'm sure you'll get the hang of them. So to conclude this little section then, first thing you need to do is when you're looking for a set of wheels on that wheel brand website, have they got parts listed for their hub? Not just a free hub body, but have they got things like axles and spacers and pulls and pull springs and end cap adapters and ratchets? Can you easily find them, access them, buy them? Or is it just, you know, you buy a wheel set and that's it, it's defunct? If that's what you're finding, you are going to be taking a risk further down the line in terms of maintenance. It's mostly fixable, but at a cost. Or are you going down the route of a branded hub, which you know that you can get fixed anywhere, that's got a good reputation for part availability, etc. One very small note here, and that is if your wheel has a different number of spokes on the drive side to the non-drive side, just be very cautious, because this can bring real problems down the line. If you really want to splash out and you really want to have some nice hubs there, we've got things like Chris King, Ultimate Durability, Royce, they just spin so smoothly and beautifully. Onyx, completely and utterly quiet, and things like Tune, which are renowned for being incredibly lightweight and still pretty durable. So go and speak to your local wheel builder. They'll talk you through loads of other options as well. Okay, on to spokes. Spokes and nipples, going to try and keep this interesting. It's a massively overlooked area, and a lot of the times brands just go for the headline names that you guys will recognize, and that is normally the Sapim CX-RAY, sort of renowned for being the lightest, the strongest, and the most expensive. So it must be good, right? But it's not good in every application. You see, it's quite a flexy spoke, so you need quite a rigid rim for this to really work well. Now, the CX-RAY spoke is famous for being more of an oval shape than completely flat and bladed, and you can feel it's got a thickness in the middle, very strong under tension for the weight. So fantastic spoke, no doubt about it. But sometimes you need to build a little bit more stiffness into your wheel, and that's where I would normally go for the DT Swiss Aerolite. And now Sapim have responded to this spoke by bringing out the CX Sprint, I think, which is very similar, just but adds a little bit more stiffness. And as you try and flex that, you can feel how much more it resists. And this is a little bit thicker in the center section as well. Still a very good spoke, but you don't see that so much on fully built wheels. And then keeping with the bladed theme, we have this from Pillar. Now Pillar is an alternative brand of spoke that's getting some traction because it's being picked up by brands like Hunt. And you can tell when you've got this in your hand, it's got edges. It's more of like an oblong shape rather than an oval shape to it. And it can actually be quite stiff. I do think these are very good spokes, definitely for the strength to weight ratio. They seem to be stacking up pretty well, but they are pretty hard to get hold of, especially here in the UK. I don't know what it is. It's just, you try and find them and you just can't get them as readily as you can DT Swiss and Sapim spokes, where every bike shop normally has a stock. We've got a big cupboard full of them over there, or we can get them on next day delivery, whereas Pillar, hard to get hold of. And you can't really mix and match either. You can't have a wheel fully built with Pillar spokes and then just slap a CX-RAY spoke in there. It doesn't really work like that. You'll never quite get the spoke tensions to marry up quite perfectly, which we'll come onto in the build. Now, alternatives to that, if you have a round spoke, that does not necessarily mean lower quality. It's just got a different characteristic. Here is a straight pull spoke, and this one is completely straight, so it's not butted in any way, which means it's 2 millimeters all the way through. And these are very, very stiff. So if you really want to make sure your wheel is torsionally stiff, going for something like this can be really, really helpful. You'll often see wheels where they've got a spoke like this on one side of the wheel to try and give a bit more stiffness where the wheel would normally suffer. And then we have butted spokes. Now, butted spokes means that they start off at 2 millimeters at either end, but they taper into a more narrow section, which makes them a little bit more flexible and a little bit more stronger for it by the time you've weaved them through the wheel. Now, these can be a really fantastic use in mountain bike and gravel wheels where you don't necessarily need the aerodynamics, but you need a little bit more stiffness. And finally, in this category, we have one of my favorite spokes. This is the DT Swiss Revolution. And the reason I like it is because it's butted, but it goes right the way down to 1.5 millimeters, which for me gives like an optimum level of stiffness, I suppose. But it's also incredibly light and really nice to build with as well. I really like this spoke. So sometimes you'll see wheels that we build here with a Sapim CX-RAY on the front wheel, and you might see something like the DT Swiss Revolution or a Sapim D-Light on the back wheel, because all depends on rider weight, and this is something we'll get into in the build section. One last little note on spokes. There's quite a lot of proprietary stuff out there as well. This is a aluminium spoke. I think it's from a Shimano wheel. I think if these break, these can be a real pain to get replaced, because you can see where the nipple is on this end and there's a thread on this end, etc. It's absolutely proprietary to that wheel. And Mavic are probably the ones that are famous for this by making their own bladed spokes, which means they can fine tune the wheel to handle exactly how they want to, but they also feature crazy little nipples like this where there's a brass section in here and an aluminium section on the outside. And these can corrode, and if you haven't got exactly the right tool, these often get chewed up by people, and you know, they're fantastic out of the box, but durability down the line, these can be a bit of a pain. However, Mavic are fantastic at providing spares. So unlike a lot of wheel brands like having pillar spokes, you can normally go into any bike shop and they'll be pretty confident that they can get hold of a Mavic spoke. Sometimes they keep them in stock, we keep a few in, but most of the time we can get these on pretty much next day delivery from a variety of sources, and we'll get you riding again pretty quickly. That's not always the case with some of the more proprietary spokes. Okay, quickly on nipples then. Now, we tend to categorize in terms of aluminium and brass. That's the material that they're made out of. Aluminium is definitely cheaper and lighter, but can suffer galvanic corrosion, especially when put into a carbon wheel. Those nobility materials really don't play well together, and then you can see all sorts of problems with that white powdery corrosion and cracking, etc. like we've seen. Brass is definitely more durable. For a small weight sacrifice, I think it's nearly always worth opting for brass nipples, unless you're really prepared to look after your wheels, really meticulously clean them, get all that salty road grit off them and look after them, in which case you can save just a few grams. In terms of nipple shape then, this is your standard 12 millimeter nipple here. These come in a 12, a 14 and a 16 millimeter long. Now, a longer nipple does not necessarily mean that it is stronger. What it does mean that if you have a thicker section on the rim that you need to protrude past, you might need to select a longer nipple like this one here. Now, that is going to add weight and complexity, but it doesn't necessarily add any sort of strength. The evolution of that standard shape is for them to have a little head on the inside. So you won't normally see this as your consumer, because this will be inside the rim and underneath all the rim tape. But there's a little square head here. Sometimes it might look like the reverse of a Torx with little stars. Now, this is kind of used for wheel building machines, so that in a machine situation, a machine screwdriver could come in, engage with that, and then tighten it, rather than coming on the inside of the wheel. It's much simpler for a machine to come in from the back. But in the bike shops, we also have tools that can get onto this as well as onto this edge here as well. So these can add a little bit of strength apparently, but I've never really found it to be an issue. We've also got a couple of other types here. You'll often see one with a hex head rather than a screw head. These can be particularly useful if you need to add a lot of tension to the spokes. If you're going up 120, 130, even higher tensions, then you can get a proper nut tool on there and really bring the spoke up to a high tension. Very rare that we use that these days. The last one, I haven't got an example here, but they look a bit like this but upside down, and they will be internal, which means that you have to adjust them from the inside of the wheel. The Envy use these quite a lot. As a general rule, when you're considering buying a set of wheels and they don't mention the nipples at all, I would normally consider them to be a 12 millimeter aluminium, because they've got nothing interesting to shout about. If they're advertising brass nipples, I'd say that is a good thing in terms of durability, but quite a lot of wheel brands try not to, so they can get that headline lightweight, because let's face it, most people buy wheels on how much are they, how heavy are they, and try and find the best compromise. So all of those wheel brands are always trying to adhere to those two metrics, price versus weight. But the savvy wheel buyer, which you will be at the end of this video, you will know to look for things like brass nipples and sacrifice just that tiny amount of weight, maybe just a couple of grams, in terms of durability is probably worthwhile. Very quickly on nipple washers. Now, nipple washers are different to spoke washers. Spoke washers go on the hub end, nipple washers go in the rim. So they'll sit inside your wheel in this configuration here. Now, there's three different types. One type is this sort of three-dimensional conical shape, and these are fantastic if you need your nipple to swivel a little bit more. So these will allow that nipple to swivel just like that and allow it to free rotate as well. Now, these can also be really good at putting another material in between the carbon and the brass or the aluminium, whatever you're doing. So they can actually help prevent corrosion in some situations as well. That's not the main purpose of them being there. The other type we have is a completely flat washer, and these are very good at distributing the load. You'll quite often see these on very light carbon wheels. And then lastly, we have nipple washers that are bent like this, and these are often used where you have a very, very tight area for the nipple to sit. So you'll often see these inside some older style aero wheels when the rim comes down to a very tight edge, and they needed to put this in there to try and distribute some of that load, but under a very restricted area. Okay, a lot of techie details in there, but how do you know what you're looking at is any good or not? Well, a red flag for me is if I just see Sapim CX-RAY spokes blanketed across everything. It shows very little imagination from the wheel builder. They've just gone for those big headline features. It's not always the best spoke for the purpose. Sometimes it is, but not always. I think it's definitely overused. So seeing the wheel builder talk about what spokes are used in what application is normally a big thumbs up for me, because it shows that someone's really put some thought into the process and knows the characteristics of the spokes and how to make the wheel set handle like they intended it to, rather than just picking, named brands that people recognize. If you're worried about durability at all, I definitely look for the brass nipple line, and you probably won't know if they're using washers or not until you start taking things apart or looking down on the inside of the wheel. So I wouldn't expect to see that in the feature list. And when it comes to proprietary spokes, like we're seeing a lot of wheels now come with carbon spokes, that's really got to be down to your own appetite for risks. You have to understand that you're not to be able to walk into a bike shop and get that fixed in a very short period of time. It's going to need reaching out to the brand, getting the spoke sent, etc. It's going to be a longer process to getting it repaired, and maybe you're okay with that for the performance advantages it gives you, but hey, at least you know now, right? Okay, I think it's time to move on to the main event, the actual rim. Okay, if hubs give you the reliability and spokes give you the ride feel, rims are what give you the performance we're looking for. So let's get into it. There are three dimensions to consider here: the depth, the width, and the type. The type is dead easy, hooked or hookless, and there is a wealth of information on YouTube and beyond about the pros and cons of both of those. But coming back to depth, this is the easy one to consider. So for a lovely, lightweight, nimble climbing wheel, 30 millimeters is about as deep as you want to go. Remember, it's all about saving that rotational weight. Beyond that, and you want a little bit of aero benefit, the 40 millimeter something is normally where most people end up as a good compromise. You don't tend to get too battered by side winds, and you don't tend to have too much rotational weight to worry about, and there's just that little bit of aero performance gain to come as well. I think that once you're into the 50 something millimeter depth, that's when you really start to notice the aerodynamics and the momentum that you get. It takes a bit more effort to get that wheel spun up. It's not as nimble to accelerate. Once you're into 60, 70, 80 millimeters, that situation is somewhat exaggerated, and you'll definitely feel that big momentum and aerodynamic effect the deeper it goes, but you'll definitely suffer from additional rotational weight as you go through. So most people tend to plump for something around 40 something millimeters is a really good compromise. So tick, that one is done. Okay, rim width. This is where things get a little bit more tricky, especially with more modern road bike wheels. For gravel and mountain bike, it's somewhat established, but for road bike, this is still an area of huge development right now. And it's got to be a component of the desired tyre width and your body weight. So you've got to start with those two parts of the equation and then work out which rim width is really going to suit you the best. Now, the place to start with this is to first work out what the tyre clearance is on your bike, and you might be restricted to 25 or 28 if it's a slightly older bike, or you might be restricted to 32 or 35 if it's a slightly more modern bike. You need to find out what the actual restrictions are on your frame as your starting point for your tyre. Then you can go to your favourite tyre manufacturer's website and start looking up what tyre size is compatible with what rim size. So for instance, here is the Continental one, and for a tubeless straight side, a 25 might be a 16 to an 18 millimeter rim. If it's for tubeless crotchet, it might be 13 to 17. I'll just leave this up here. It's just as a demonstration as to where to look for this information. And just for comparison, here is the Pirelli one, slightly different. They're like 26 millimeters, not for hookless at all, so you can rule that out potentially straight away. And the 28s need a 17 to 21, etc., etc. So you've kind of got a range already as to what to look for. Now you can start to narrow things down. So now you've got a range of rim widths that are going to suit the tyre choice. You now need to consider your body weight and the desired tyre pressures. So if you are looking for a hooked rim, it's dead easy. If you're fairly light and you need a very narrow tyre, just look for a rim that's got a 19 millimeter or very close to it profile, and you'll be absolutely golden. If you're slightly heavier and you want a slightly wider tyre, a 21, there's actually loads of range there to play with as well, not a problem at all. If you want hookless, that is where things get a little bit trickier. And this is where you're going to need to go to those brands, manufacturers, individual websites and start looking up the tyre pressure calculator and making sure that you do not exceed that magic 73 PSI with your weight. And it's actually fairly easy to do. If you are dead set on hookless, or you've been forced in that direction because your giant bike came with it, or you really want those aerodynamic benefits of something like a zip wheel, then you definitely need to consider your body weight. I'm just putting up a table on the screen here. This is from the SRAM tyre pressure calculator, which we've talked about before. And you'll see that very easily you can exceed the maximum pressure for your body weight. The biggest problem we see is probably these combinations here. This is the 19 millimeter wide and the 21 millimeter wide on a 28 millimeter tyre. And this 77 kilograms and 84 kilograms are the sort of the common areas where people fall, because for the average height male and the average weight male, you fall in those boundaries and you can bounce off the maximum pressures very, very easily. If you look at the Envy one, it's very, very similar numbers for your body weight and the tyre size, etc. The Giant one is a little bit different. They have 19.4 millimeters, 22.4 millimeters, but they tend to ramp up their recommendations quite quickly. Now, I can imagine they might have done that to possibly prevent any sort of mis-selling claim, because there's possibilities here of your bike being sold to you with a tyre combination that wasn't safe. But Giant have got all the information on their website about how they test tyres. So all I'd urge you to do is go and look and check and put the details in for yourself, and you'll find it's an absolute mess out there, but you just need to make the best educated decision you can on that, really. Now, if you're going outside one of the major brands and the brand that you're buying from is a hookless design and they don't have a tyre pressure calculator or recommended pressures, you really need to pay attention to the details. So brands that fall into this category, we've talked about them before, Extra Light, Percenti, etc. And here on the Extra Light product information, you can see there's very specific details about how many wraps of rim tape you have to use, the thickness of the rim tape that you have to use, and even add in additional layers to absolutely fine tune the fit to make it safe. And then there's very specific pressure guidance as well. So you still have to go to your tyre manufacturer, check their pressure and recommendations, your body weight, and still do a lot of checking to make sure you've got a safe setup. Personally, if that's completely baffled your brain and you cannot be bothered with it, like the majority of it, just look for a wheel that is hooked. Most brands are stepping away from it like a bad smell. Hunt, for instance, have hardly got any hookless wheels in their range anymore. They've learned their lessons, they've been there, done that, and don't want to go anywhere near it. I think Parkour are the same, and most of the wheels that we see launch onto the market now are not hookless. It's only really those three brands that are digging their heels in. Okay, quick recap then. First, choose the depth, and if you're really worried about the specific aerodynamics, go to another channel, have a look at that. Otherwise, there's plenty of information there to look at. Once you've chosen your depth, then choose your type, whether you need to go hooked or hookless. And then once you've made that decision, then come and look at your rim width and do all of those calculations that we talked about to make sure that you can run the size tyre that you need to run for your frame at the right pressure for your body weight safely. And that is how you'll eventually narrow your choice down to the perfect rim for you. All right, let's move on to something a whole lot more interesting than that. We're going to go back downstairs to the workshop and we're going to talk about how all of this comes together in a perfectly built and tensioned wheel. Right, let's get out of here. So now we have all three pieces of this puzzle understood. Now is the time to talk about the entire build. Now this wheel here is literally a 90 quid wheel. It's one of those things that it's just a no-brainer for a bike shop. We couldn't even buy the components for that sort of money. And for people that need to get rolling, even on a real budget wheel like this, the fundamentals of good build quality are important. Now, one of the very first things I look for is how the spoke and the nipple are interacting with each other. So what we don't want to see is any threads on this side of the nipple at all. This should be completely closed down. We shouldn't see any threads there. Likewise, we shouldn't see any threads poking out the top at all. That's pretty bad as well. What we're looking for is a builder that's selected the right spoke length so it's under tension and the threads are fully engaged in the nipple. So you can tell that when you look down these spoke holes, you should be able to see the inside of the spoke not protruding all the way through. On a really bad wheel, and we've seen some really bad ones, that spoke can be protruding so far that it can actually punch through the rim tape and then give you a puncture. So really, really not cool. The next thing we look for, and we mentioned it on that hunt video if you remember, is how central the spoke is to the nipple. This should be absolutely central. The shaft of the spoke should be perfectly in line with the nipple. We should have a circular ring the whole way around. If it's at a really, really extreme angle and being pulled over, you'll see like a crescent moon size gap. That's definitely not cool either. The last piece of the puzzle is that the nipple should be central to the actual hole in the rim. That's just a very, very quick visual check to see is your wheel in really good condition. After that, we have like the 3 dimensions of wheel building, if you like. We have the dishing, so making sure the center line of the wheel is in line with the center line of the hub, unless you have a Cannondale, and we use a dishing tool for this. And on this wheel here, I can use this dishing tool and I can tell you it's already a couple of millimeters dished off towards the disc side, which isn't cool, but it's a very, very quick job to sort that out. Then I have these 2 gauges here. One is checking the true left to right and one is checking the true up and down, like whether it's egg-shaped or not. Now, there's certain standards for this, and there's also the unspoken rule amongst wheel builders for this. I'm going to tell you what it is. If you're doing a national apprenticeship with us, you need to be able to build a wheel to 0.2 millimeters accuracy on both dimensions inside 90 minutes, just to give you an idea what our apprentices do here. I think that's a fairly good base, so long as you've got the tools and the good quality materials that are going to help you achieve that. Sometimes the quality of the materials just don't help you at all. In this case, we're about 0.5 of a millimeter left and right, which is okay for a cheap budget wheel. And I think if I spent another 20 minutes or so with this, we'd easily get it down to that 0.2. And the final dimension to this is tension. This is a tensiometer. You can get digital ones, you can get ones that hook up to computers, but this is what most bike shops will have. It's what we use most of the time because it's very quick, easy to use. We have got some digital ones when we really, really need to use them. This is quite simply going to measure the deflection, and you take a number off this. The important thing is 1, that they're all equal, and 2, that they're all within range. And if they're not equal, what it will mean is that, let's say we have these 3 spokes here. So these 2 little bad boys, these could be really, really, really tight, and this one's having a right lazy time of it, not doing any work at all. If that's the case, this one will start to shake itself loose, and these 2 will have to take even more load to try and keep the wheel true again, and that's when you end up with broken nipples, etc. So what we're trying to do is make sure that all of the spokes are sharing the forces nice and evenly. And then of course there is that whole aspect is, are within all the safety parameters. So you will find that the hub, the spokes and the rim all have a maximum and potentially even a minimum kilograms of force rating. So the wheel builder has to take all of that into account, true the wheel, and make sure that all the spoke tensions are balanced and within the safety ranges. And then a really experienced wheel builder can probably fine tune that spoke tension within all those parameters and then start deciding what sort of tension the rider wants. So if you have very, very tight spokes, you'll get a very reactive wheel. So if you try and accelerate, it will feel really, really sharp. The tighter you get, the more brittle the spokes get, and you might risk actually breaking a spoke. If they're too loose, you'll find that your wheel becomes quite wallowy and soggy. Trying to find the optimum for your rider preference and their weight is the skill of a really, really good wheel builder. Okay, to sum all that up very quickly, everything should look centered and aligned. If anything looks skewed or forced or strained, that's bad. If you see threads poking out here or you see threads poking out here, that's pretty bad. And as a rough guide, you can just go around and you can normally feel loose spokes at all. If you've got loose spokes from a wheel, new out of the box, you need to send that back straight away. They should all feel pretty balanced. This is a massive subject. We could spend hours on this subject alone, but hopefully that's just enough information for you to decide, are you looking at a good quality product or not? Okay, almost there. One last thing to talk about. I think we have just one more thing to consider here, and that is the warranty period. You see, quite a lot of wheels, for whatever reason, have warranties that extend way beyond your consumer rights. Some are even boasting just fantastic, unbelievable warranty periods. But in my experience, they can often be a little bit too good to be true. You see, take this example from Pacenti, a brand that we have a lot of history with. We recently sent them this wheel that you can kind of see is all chossed up, and they agreed that it's a warranty claim. They've had that now for 8 weeks and there's no signs of any sort of warranty resolution in there, even though they've agreed to it and there's a 5-year warranty on it, because they simply don't have anything to replace it with. So, I mean, what can you do? Some of the best warranties in the business is Reserve Wheels, who are making just some absolutely fantastic claims, but they seem to be such a young company that we're not really sure how that's going to pan out, although they are backed by the big Pond Holdings. So I think that's a fairly safe bet. Things like Parkour, another similar home-built wheel, if you like, offering some fantastic warranties, which are really trying to reassure you that you're getting a quality product. Whether they can actually honour that years down the line is yet to be seen. And then there's always things like the Chinese brands, and you've really got to dive into the detail with these. But I think you know that if you're buying from one of the Chinese factory direct brands, that it's going to be a risk. We've had such mixed experiences of the Chinese brands, ranging from a new product on our doorstep before we've even had a chance to send the old one off, to things just mysteriously disappearing and ended up having to claim on the shipping insurance for them. So I really couldn't make policy that they're good or bad. It's just, I think it's worth reading through them and deciding for yourself your appetite for risk. Now, with all of that in mind, let's have a strategy for trying to find you the most ideal set of wheels. Now, here is a list of criteria that we can go through, and I want you to grab a piece of paper and write down which ones are the most important to you. So we have things like repairability. Can you actually get parts like we described, hubs, axles, washers, nipples, etc.? Are they actually available? And then what about serviceability? Are you able to service these at home with basic tools, or are you going to need proprietary lock ring tools and whatever to do it? I put durability and weight next to each other because the two are so closely interlinked, because quite often if you need something to be extra durable, you normally sacrifice some weight. And then aerodynamics. If aerodynamics is really, really important to you, that needs to go on top of the list, and you're likely to be sacrificing lots of other things on the way down. Now, I've put stiffness on this list, but it probably shouldn't be. The reason I put it on the list is because we've definitely seen wheels. In fact, you've seen wheels on that video that we did about Scribe and the Facebook wheels, etc., when the wheels are so loose that you couldn't really operate them. So it should be a given, but if stiffness is really important to you for things like accelerating and braking, then maybe you could lift that a little bit higher up the list. And then on the list there, we've got tyre choice, and that is because if you have certain limitations with your frame or your body weight, then tyre choice might become a slightly higher priority, and you need to look a little bit closer like we described. So with all of that in mind, we can now start thinking about benchmarks. Hopefully this video has shown you how you can decide what the benchmark is in each one of those categories. And then you can decide whether you're prepared to pay more, and if you are paying more, what you hope to gain from that extra investment, or if you need to compromise, be really mindful of what you're going to lose by making that compromise and being happy with that decision. Now, we couldn't really end this video without me making at least some kind of recommendation, even though this is such a massive area. So here we are. This is my benchmark, my extravagance, and my compromise choice. The benchmark, as you know, on this channel for me is the fast forward Riot, the 33s, the 44s, the 55s on a DT Swiss hub. I really think that for that sort of money, it's really, really difficult to go wrong. They're 21mm internal. They are hooked. They are built of brass nipples, Sapim spokes, DT Swiss. The rims are fantastic. The warranty is adequate and they honour it, and everything and every experience I've had with that warranty has been very positive and the situations have been sorted. For me, that is the benchmark, and I think it's a fairly fair price. Probably the best on the market right now. If you really had to go, Paul, what are the best wheels on the market? I'm really impressed with the Princeton Dual 550s. And you got to say the best hubs on the market have got to be the Chris King ceramics. They'll just go on forever and ever and ever. They're like heirloom hubs, but you're paying massive money for them. Your compromise. Now I've put on here a bill that we would likely do in the shop. If you came to us and said, I've got this much money to spend, what would you put together? This is it. And it's also very similar to what you're going to find from all of these micro wheel brands, because they're all buying things from the same place. And that is probably a set of Venn 40 TCD rims. Solid, reliable choice. We can get them completely unbranded. And I'm pretty sure that most of those wheel brands out there that just pop up all over the place are likely using Venn rims just with their stickers on, or iCan or whatever it is. But you get the idea. Bitex hubs, absolutely solid, reliable choice. You can get parts. They're often rebranded. In fact, shout out to Ryan Builds Wheels, who we buy spokes off. He's just launched like his own wheel brand called Ryan Builds Wheels, and full transparency, well done, because he just said, I have got Bitex hubs rebranded and you can buy this wheel set from me. So if you are looking for this sort of compromise, give those guys a shout. If you haven't got a bike shop like us in your vicinity, maybe your bike shop just sells you things off the shelf, but you want to get something custom, there's places like Ryan Builds Wheels out there to help you out. And then I have to say, if you really, really have got your mind set on a hookless rim, or you really want something interesting, at that top end, I have to admit, the Zip 454 NSWs, they ride so fantastically well. The hubs are atrocious, but those wheels are amazing. Whether you're willing to have all those compromises for those aerodynamics, totally up to you. Again, on the hookless, if you really, really, really want hookless, I think the best hookless wheels out there right now are the Percenti Picos. They're good, they're reliable, they're strong. Got lots of advice about what tyres, etc. to run. Outside of that, I don't know, just find something on eBay. To be honest, I couldn't think of anything else lower than that. So, there was a big, big subject. If anyone is actually still watching, then well done for getting this far through the video. And hopefully you can come back to this and use the timestamps and crack on. If you like this sort of video, please like, subscribe, share it, bookmark it, come back to it when you need it. And yeah, as always, get into those comments, leave your experiences down below, especially relating to the warranty, because the only way we know about warranty is if you guys share your experiences. Okay. I'm done.